أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين. ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه أجمعين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أرواحنا له فداء. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، توبوا إلى الله توبة نصوحا. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Eid Mubarak. Today is yet another day in which, or another year, in which the blessed month of Ramadan has come and it has gone. This is yet another moment, another step in our lives. But it is a moment which we should reflect and we should ponder upon greatly. That what is the meaning of this moment that we are in now? What is the meaning of the passing of the month of Ramadan? What does it mean that Ramadan has actually left us? And if we look at the ibadah, or most of the ibadah that we engage in, or even the blessings and the ni'mah that we obtain from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the things that we will notice that is different from any other ibadah that we engage in. There are a few others that we engage in. One is, for example, the Eid al-Adha. But there's an interesting aspect of this particular ibadah, because Ramadan in itself is a blessing, it's a ni'mah. And it is one of the only blessings and ni'mah that we receive from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we actually bid farewell to this month. We bid farewell to the blessings. Often, if you look at most of the dua, most du'as, we are calling and we are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring His blessing upon us, to shed His blessing and His mercy upon us. And we ask this during the month of Ramadan itself. But then when this month finishes, we say al-wada, farewell, farewell, goodbye. We say this, again, often when we actually, in our own and just common terms, usually we bid someone farewell when we have some sort of affection and affinity for that person. We want to greet them and we want to see them off. Ramadan has a similar aspect. That when we look at the du'as, particularly the dua of Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam, he bids this month farewell. And subhanAllah, one of the statements that he says is, Assalamu alayka ya Eid al-awliya. He calls Ramadan is Eid, not today. He says, Assalamu alayka ya Eid al-awliya. Ramadan is the Eid of the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who, again, who love and long to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, in one of the beautiful narrations of the Prophet, it was a quite long narration, and I will not give the entire narration, so we can, again, celebrate, we can socialize. But the Prophet of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he had mentioned to one of his companions, he said that if, and only if you knew what was in the blessed month of Ramadan, you would wish that that Ramadan would be for an entire year, not 30 days. So this companion said, what is it about Ramadan that someone would wish for it to be 30 days? Some at the beginning, and unfortunately sometimes at the beginning of Ramadan, we can't wait till it ends. And then when it ends, we can't wait till it begins again. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says that if you knew the special atmosphere of Ramadan, you would wish that was for an entire year, not only 30 days. So when the companion asks, he says, why? And just one of the reasons he gave, he says, Ramadan, and just to show you how special Ramadan is, he says that paradise, the zuyyina ya Ramadan, that paradise begins to adorn itself simply for the month of Ramadan. But imagine that this is a month, or this was a month that was so great that paradise itself cannot wait until this month comes around. So imagine us that when we have passed through this month of Ramadan, fasting, and hopefully fasting as we should have been fasting, and now we are coming outside of this month, which paradise longs for that month. So we should measure our own degree of longing for Ramadan, our own degree of, again, weightiness, because when we look at the Prophet and Imams, the passing of Ramadan was something that was very weighty for them. I mean, it's very clear from the statement of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Assalamu alayka ya Eid awliya. That peace be upon you, O Eid, the festival of those who are the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those who long to engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With that said, this is a day to assess our deeds, to assess the blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, to assess that how well we have gained from that blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and truly also recognize the day of Eid for what it is, that not only is a day of happiness, a day of joy, but it's also a day in which we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive any of our shortcomings during the blessed month of Ramadan. Just as during the day, when we make our salat, we make nawafil in order to make up for any shortcomings in our salat. That's the philosophy of nawafil. Part of the philosophy of Eid is the same. This is why also the night of Eid, on the Eve last night, was also one of the nights recommended to stay up all night, to make dua, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. Today, not only a day of socializing, but also asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. This is something that Imam Zayn al-Abidin also he mentions in his dua of wida of the month of Ramadan. He says, simply, he refers, he says, Anta alladhi, speaking to Allah, that Allah, you are the one, فَتَحْتَ لِعِبَادِكَ بَابًا إِلَىٰ عَفْوِكَ وَسَمَّيْتَهُ التَّوْبَةِ وَجَعَلْتَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ الْبَابِ دَلِيلًا مِنْ وَحْيِكَ لِأَلَّا يَضِلُّوا عَنْهُ فَقُلْتَ تَبَارَكَ اسْمُكَ تُوبُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ تَوْبَةً نَصُوحًا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has opened the blessed month of Ramadan. He's opened a bab of mercy and forgiveness, and it's called Tawbah. He mentions this in the wida of Ramadan. He says, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He indicates upon this in the Quran, Tubu ila Allah, Tawbatan Nasuha. And at the end of that, He says, فَمَا عُذْرُ مَنْ أَغْفَلَ دُخُولَ ذَلِكَ الْمَنْزِلِ بَعْدَ فَتْحِ الْبَابِ وَإِقَامَةِ الدَّلِيلِ. He says, and there's no excuse for those who have not entered into that door. And this is, again, an opportunity for us to enter into that door of Tawbah, that as the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he has promised that if we have fasted the way we should have fasted in the month of Ramadan, then after the month of Ramadan, our slate is wiped completely clean. That we are sinless. Our slate is wiped clean, and now we start from anew, afresh. We start our deeds, we start our a'mal, we start our interaction together, our socialization, again, on a different plane, on a different level, in a more pure state. And I would say that if we feel, and even if we didn't feel that we had any shortcomings, it is always great to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh, atubu ilallah, atubu ilallah, atubu ilallah. To make sure that our sin is wiped clean, we ask our brothers and sisters in Islam for forgiveness, that if there was any shortcoming on our behalf, then please forgive us, so that after the blessed month of Ramadan, as we begin this blessed month of Shawwal, that again we start afresh. We start our relationships afresh as well. So when we greet each other, this greeting is not simply a greeting of Ramadan Mubarak, but it's also a greeting that if we've done anything to rub anyone in the wrong way, that we apologize for that. So again, even our relationship as brothers and sisters should be stronger after the month of Ramadan. That anything that has preceded the blessed month of Ramadan, that those things should be put aside. Our relationships should start from anew and afresh. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He continues to guide us through the wisdom of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, and allow us to have the ethics and the akhlaq, the ethos of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم صل على أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أوصيائه وأولياء الله أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب والحسن بن علي والحسين بن علي وعلي بن حسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المنتظر المحبوب. عجل الله تعالى فرجه. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. First and foremost, I advise myself for taqwa Allah, consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I advise each of you for taqwa Allah, consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just as a final reminder, as we have been mentioning throughout the blessed month of Ramadan, that Ramadan is a month of social consciousness, understanding what our duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with regards to one another, as a community, as a family, as an international family, as a national family. This is one of the things that we must be conscious of. This is one of the things also that stands out as well within the dua of wida, the farewell of Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam. When he bids farewell to this blessed month, and in one part he says, وَأَعِنِّي اللَّهُمَّ عَلَى جِهَادِ عَدُوِّكَ فِي سَبِيلِكَ مَعَ وَلِيِّكَ كَمَا قُلْتَ جل قولك إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة يقاتلون في سبيل الله. That he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to stand with the wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to oppose oppression. To oppose oppression. And this is part of the wida, the farewell of the blessed month of Ramadan. And as we mentioned throughout the blessed month of Ramadan, many of the du'as in the month of Ramadan for each night, that we are reminded time and time again of our social duty, our social responsibility, and we should not forget this. As we mentioned yesterday, and I'll mention again since there's more people here, the World Federation is also there helping the brothers and sisters in Yemen because they were in a very dire situation during the blessed month of Ramadan. In fact, even some of them could not even fast because of the situation. But the country was on the brink of famine. Imagine, on the brink of famine, not having enough food just to sustain life in the blessed month of Ramadan. And this is a country that is full of Muslims, but because they were being bombarded and being attacked by other Muslims, they were on the brink of famine. And we have a responsibility, we have a duty to, again, to stand up for what is right. Again, and if we see Muslims fighting, it is our responsibility to come, to stand in, to bring about some sort of peace, to bring some relief for those who are being oppressed, and especially if they're being oppressed by other Muslims. So we should not forget this responsibility. Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, in several places in the dua of Wida of the blessed month of Ramadan, he mentions this, he emphasizes this, and so let us not forget our duty and our responsibility, first and foremost to our families, to our community, but also to those who are outside our community on the international scene. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He hasten the reappearance of Imam Zaman, He makes us among His helpers, His companions, among those who sacrifice our lives for Him. And inshallah, we will again bid each other a blessed Ramadan. But as we do so, again, remember the state of each other, remember to ask forgiveness from one another, and remember, again, to remind each other of your duty and your responsibility before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, we will carry this blessed month of Shawwal. We will begin on a new page. Inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our shortcomings. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive those who are ill and sick within our community. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.